Kate Volman is the CEO of Floyd Coaching, and she's the author of Do What You Love, A Guide to Living Your Creative Life Without Leaving Your Job. She's also the host of podcasts Lead with Culture and Create for No Reason. She spent over 2 decades helping entrepreneurs and executives build engaged, high-performing teams by combining personal growth with leadership excellence. Today, we're going to be talking about what truly drives culture, creativity, and fulfillment at work. I want to really talk about how leaders can bring out the best in their people and themselves as well. So, Kate, thank you so much for setting aside the time. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Mason. So good to be here.
So I just want to dive right into it because we got a whole bunch of cool stuff to cover, if you don't mind. I wanted to ask about your book. Do What You Love is about embracing creativity without abandoning one's job. Could you share a story of how you balanced a demanding corporate role with personal passions and how that experience can inspire CEOs who feel stuck between obligation and desire?
Yeah, so the reason I wrote this book is because I feel like I've had the opportunity to do this throughout my career. So when I worked at a chamber of commerce, it was one of my first roles. And, I was just getting into the workforce. I didn't know what to expect. And I just had this curiosity around media and marketing. And this was around 2008. So it was just when social media was coming up and Facebook and YouTube and all these things. And I remember back then when I was working in a job that I really loved. I loved working at the chamber. I loved it. And which is a blessing in itself, right? Not everybody loves
Sure.
their work. And then I also got so curious about, you can do videos and post them online and I can help feature the businesses that I'm working with. And so I just learned a lot at the chamber about entrepreneurship and advocacy and networking and community. And so I got my little pink flip cam and I would bring it to chamber meetings and I would pull the speakers of our events aside and say, hey, let me ask you a couple questions. So I had my little pink flip cam asking him questions. And it was just, I had so much fun doing it. And so I just started playing around with it. I built a website on Weebly.com. This is like forever ago. I don't even know if that still exists, and I just like played around with it. So it was at the very start of my career that I discovered the importance of, yes, you have a job to do, but then you have these other creative passions that you may be able to incorporate into your work and maybe you don't, but how important they are because they fill you with energy. And so they bring joy to your life, they fill you with energy. And I think that so often we get so focused on work that we forget about our creative passions and how much they help us excel in all areas of our lives.
Well, it's cool that you were in a role that allowed you to do that. And not only that, but just for unleashing your creativity, but to be able to develop new skills that are valuable and marketable. And what advice or guidance might you give to someone who may not have quite that much autonomy or freedom, or where the company might look down on you like you're not focused on the company's mission? What advice do you have for people in that kind of predicament, for lack of a better word?
Well, I think this is a culture conversation, right? For the
Oh, yeah.
first thing is there are a lot of leaders. There are many, like I run a company that is all about helping people become the best version of themselves, right? Like our team, we certify dream managers, we help leaders with company culture, we help them engage with their team members by learning about the dreams that they have for their life. And so finding an organization that values you as a whole person is important. And there are leaders like that out there, right? So I think being part of that type of culture is you working with a leader who cares about you and the other areas of your life. They recognize and realize that you're a whole person. When you go home, you're thinking about work. And when you go to work, you're thinking about home. And so we have to be treating people and understanding that they are a whole person. And so working for an organization that recognizes that and also feeds into those gifts, right? So like for me, I was fortunate that I had an opportunity to kind of incorporate some of my creative passions into my work. But for a lot of people, they love dancing, singing, gardening, playing guitar. And so there are pockets of time that we can find for our creative outlets and those things that bring us joy. And so I think that's really important for all of us to recognize, right? You don't have to wait until you have 5 hours in a day to do something that you love. It can be something that you just do for 10 minutes a day or an hour a week or just anything that just allows them that creative space.
So let's just say, for the sake of discussion, that a corporate environment exists that might be a little bit more old school and rigid, where it's just like anytime you're not focusing on your job and focusing on the work, you're ripping the company off. And that might be a little bit of an extreme example, but some folks think like that. What advice would you have to aspiring leaders or executives who do see the big picture and do see the value of encouraging some creativity and encouraging things other than the nose to the grindstone from the time you open your eyes to the time you close them at night? What advice or guidance do you have for them trying to improve a culture from something that's more rigid to something that's a little bit more open?
Knowing the dreams of your team members is the first step, right? It's a start. When organizations that, like you're talking about, you have to come in and do the work and it's all about the numbers, and great, like those things matter. It's not saying that
Sure.
those things don't matter, but an organization can only grow and be the best version of itself to the extent that your people are becoming better versions of themselves. And when you recognize that and you realize that, you're going to lead differently. When someone comes into work, of course, they are there to do a job. And hopefully they have very clear expectations on what their
Sure.
role is and what is expected of them and all of those pieces. But that doesn't mean that as a leader, you can't also know that this person loves writing or loves art and they paint when they go home and maybe they have a little gallery showing or something. Like, it's not to say that you can't know that and
Right.
also feed into that. And so, one I remember years ago, it was like 2009. I was at the Entrepreneur Magazine Entrepreneur of the Year award event, and this gentleman who was the winner, I think it was Rick Altman. He was the CEO of Skull Candy, and he talked about the importance of the people on his team having a hobby, something outside, something
Sure.
sporty, because that's kind of like their business. And I've also heard Kevin O'Leary, Mr. Wonderful on Shark Tank, he says, "I hire people that have hobbies. I hire people that have hobbies because they are a more well-rounded individual. They're more well-rounded person." And so when you can help your team members achieve their dreams personally, they're going to show up at work much differently. So, 70% of the workforce is disengaged. So you have leaders all over saying, "Why are my people disengaged and they're not working and they're not trying hard and quiet quitting and all of these things that are happening?" Well, they're not engaged at work because they're probably disengaged in their own life too, because people have stopped dreaming. And so when you as a leader invite your team to dream, oh my God, not only are you changing the culture at the organization, you're changing that person's life.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. So you've suggested using the journaling prompt, "My life is better when," and listed habits like reducing social media time, journaling daily, and focusing on what you can control. How do you use journaling to regain focus during periods of stress? And can you maybe even give an example of it influencing a major business choice in your world?
I think journaling is one of the best things that we can do on a regular basis because we're all in our heads, right, Mason? Like, we
Well,
can get
sure.
so stuck in our heads, and especially CEOs, leaders, you might not have a lot of people to talk through your challenges with. And so one of the benefits is of journaling is just getting all of those thoughts out of our head and onto the page. Doing that, I think especially when we're making a decision, emotions can run really high, right? So we're like, I have to make this decision, and you might make the wrong decision. So journaling, you can use all different forms of journaling. You can use journaling prompts. You can use, I'm just going to start writing and see what pops up. You can use journaling as a way to decide, hey, these are the two options that I'm thinking of, but you can actually journal your way into a third option just because you're writing it all out. And so I often recommend journaling to a lot of CEOs. In fact, I was working with somebody, it was the CEO of this huge organization and just hundreds of people that he was responsible for. And I remember he just was so stressed out all the time. Every time we had a call, he was just so stressed out about everything. And so I encouraged him to start journaling. And he looked at me like I was crazy. He's like, "I'm not doing that. I'm not journaling. Like, that is not for me. Like, what am I, a little girl?" And so, but I encouraged him. I'm like, I would give him journaling prompts at the end of our sessions that would be related to whatever it is he was going through. And I will tell you, he did not want to admit it to me, but he after a couple months, he said, I'm doing it on my own now. Like, this has been such an incredible practice that I never would have picked up had it not been for our calls. And it had really helped support him in some of the decisions that he's making. So I think journaling is just so great in decision making and just helping us feel calm about different decisions, just helping us even more clarify and solidify our thoughts. And just writing is such an important way to help us think through things. And so I'm a huge fan of journaling for anyone.
And then, because because journaling makes sense to me, and to an extent, I do. I don't know that I would call it journaling, but I do keep a log and I do keep journals. But I don't do it like a diary. I just like, oh, I got a good idea and I'll make a note of that, or oh, that was an interesting experience. I want to write about that later.
I see journaling as an important way to just get it all out of your head, like,
Okay.
before you go to AI. Like, to me, AI is more of like a thought partner, like, let me
Yes.
lo or like a
Yes.
coach kind of a thing, like, "Hey, let's talk through I wanna talk through this with someone," whereas journaling is like, I'm not even there yet, I wanna just get all of this craziness out.
Okay.
Because journaling looks different for everyone, right? Like, to you, like, journaling is like lists and like that's great. That's journaling. For other people, it's like for me, sometimes it literally is like Julia Cameron wrote this book I talk about all the time, The Artist Way, and she shares morning pages. She talks about morning pages, and morning pages is where you just wake up first thing in the morning before you've had coffee or taken a walk or done anything. You just journal, free flow writing for 3 pages. She's like, you have to write 3 pages. And the reason behind it is because there is so much going on in our brains that we don't really know about. So you have to like force yourself to write. And if you don't know what to write, she says, write anything. You could start journaling by writing down your grocery list because you just have nothing else to say. And then all of a sudden, you'll start writing, and the craziest things will show up. But you have to start writing. And so I think that's where it's important for us to like get all those things out of our head. I do think it's important for us to have these of our own ideas and flesh things through and like think about things before we go to AI to just kind of give us answers or to share stuff. I think it's important for us to really think through a lot of stuff first.
Well, just out of curiosity, what are some of the things that are common denominators, or are there some themes in your content after you journal? I mean, are there just, or is it just totally random? Because you got me curious on
Well,
this.
it kind of depends on what's going on in life, right? Like, I love looking at old journals and seeing, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I spent a week or 2 weeks talking about this one thing that at the time felt like my whole world. And it's such a blip in what my world is. I think it was
Sure.
like such a perspective thing for me. So, but I think for me, like, I just have noticed what I notice the most is how surprised I get by what I write. Almost
Okay.
every time there's something that I write and I'm thinking, wow, I knew that, but I think I almost was too scared to say it. It's almost like you're a place where you're admitting those deep down thoughts that you don't want to share with someone, but you have to because you're writing. And so something always shows up for me that surprises me. And that's one of the best parts about journaling is like you surprise yourself with what shows up. Like I said, even if it's potentially discovering a new third or fourth option that you never would have because you weren't talking through it. Or maybe you realize something that you thought was such a problem in your life is actually not that big of a problem. And so I don't know. I just think we can surprise ourselves.
It's funny where our conversation goes, because I worked for a man who was a national sales trainer right out of college. And one of the first things he taught me, which I'd never forgotten, he said, your worst pen is better than your best memory. So take notes. So I found myself across the desk from CEOs and sales managers and human resource executives on a regular basis. And I would talk to them about what they were doing well, what obstacles they had, what things they had tried to overcome those obstacles, what worked, what didn't work. And I took very copious notes, and I kept all of them. This was old school, the little manila folders and handwritten notes. And after a while, it made me feel really smart, because I could go talk to one executive who had solved a problem that another executive has right now. And then the executive right now has a solution to a different industry executive's challenges. And all of a sudden, it didn't take but a couple of years. And all of a sudden, I felt pretty smart, which that wasn't the big thing. What it was that I was around very smart people, and I had the record of their thoughts and their ideas. And when it came to write my first book, I wrote my first book in 1999. And people talk, well, was that hard? Did it take a long time? I'm like, no, it didn't. It took a few days. because I had literally had all of the notes from all of my sales calls. And I just literally wrote those stories, organized them into segments, and then basically put them into chapters and wrote the transitions from one to the other. But because I really had the content there, it was just a matter of polishing it, organizing it, packaging it, and writing the transitions. And it was so therapeutic. And like you talked about, to be able to look back, those lessons weren't lost on me. I got to learn vicariously through other people. As Alex Hormozy says, I got the lessons without the scars,
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
because it was, and I guess the nice thing about having that was I wasn't going to trip over the same rocks that other people had tripped over, because you might call it journaling. My old boss would have called it taking notes, paying attention to prospect, but I don't want to digress. This is about your experience, not mine. So I know that
No,
you've
but that's
also,
awesome. I think that it's call it journaling, call it writing, call it taking notes, whatever makes you feel good about it. Writing is important.
to me, it is, because I obviously people talk about visual learners, auditory learners, kinesthetic. I'm visual number one, kinesthetic number two, and auditory very little. Like if someone explains something to me, it just doesn't sink in. I have to write it down. But by the time I see it written in notes and the time I write it down and physically go, I usually remember it. But I just have to
Yeah.
listen long enough to write it down, and that's my challenge. So I know you've written about imposter syndrome, and that's something I hear a lot of people talking about. Can you tell us about a moment that you or someone you've worked with closely felt like an imposter, and the steps that were taken to move past it?
So imposter syndrome is so funny. And I did talk about it in my book. And it's like we have to stop giving it power, I guess, right? Like if people say, "Oh, I have imposter syndrome." If imposter syndrome is stopping you from pursuing your dreams, then it's a problem. We just have to work through it by just stepping over it, right? It's like, okay, we get it. Oh, like I feel like an imposter because I haven't done something. It's almost like when we talk about trusting the process. I love talking about the creative process. And oftentimes, even when we certify dream managers, we will tell them, I know there's a lot of information. You have to trust the process. And we're telling these people to trust the process, but they're learning something new. They're learning how
Right.
to coach people. And so how can we expect that they're going to be confident in this new role just because we're telling them to trust the process because they haven't done it yet? And so after a few months, they always come back and they're like, we get it. Okay, we should have trusted the process and not been so nervous, because they excel in the role as coaching because they do great and we teach them how to do that. We just have to get over that fact that sometimes, especially when we're doing something new that we are unsure of, we're going to kind of have those feelings. And it it just can't stop us from doing the work, right? Like that's the biggest thing. I mean, I'm a huge fan of The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, right? He talks about the resistance. He talks about imposters, all of those things. And the resistance is what stops us from doing the work, from doing the thing we know that we should do. And so that whole book is really about, are you a professional or an amateur? The professional shows up, like even in the face of fear, even in the face of imposter syndrome, all of those things. So we just have to recognize that, hey, you know what? Sometimes I'm going to feel a little bit less confident than I want to, but guess what helps you become confident? Doing the work, putting in the reps. The more reps that you do, the less you feel like an imposter, but then you level up and now you're at a different level. And so you might kind of get that feeling again because you're doing something new. And so I think it really just is something that we have to be comfortable with, and just recognizing when we feel that way and then just pushing through it. I think so often in whether it's creative practice or you're running a business, you're part of a team, anything, we just have to keep showing up and put in the work and know and believe that you're going to get better through the practice of it all.
It's funny. You're really extracting from my memory some things. Like I was talking to you about the sales trainer that I worked for that said your worst pen is better than your best memory. One of his other little methods of encouragement, he said, do the thing you fear and the death of fear is certain. And I can't tell you how many times I've gone up to do something like, do the thing you fear and death of fear is certain. And then you do the reps, and then you become familiar with it and comfortable with it. And I think he was also very good influence on me early in my career and telling you, look, don't be afraid to suck at something new. Just do your
Yes.
best and work on making your best better. That's all you can ask of anybody, but you'll never know what that is if you don't try.
You'll never, I'm in love. There's this verse, or it's a paragraph, whatever you want to call it. It's this idea that Ira Glass came up with and wrote about, and it's called the taste gap. And it basically is where he talks about how in the beginning you suck. Like you just have to We
You
all
got
suck
deal.
when we're beginning, like, just get over it, you're just gonna suck. Like, if you some of your favorite creators, podcasters, YouTubers, whatever, if you go back and watch their very first video, it's probably not great, right? And so it's like even writers, I know a lot of writers that have written multiple books and they're like, "Don't read my first book. It's horrible." And so but they've gotten so much better, right? And so but the taste gap, that's what he says. He's like, "It's you're gonna suck and like you have to be okay with sucking." And the taste gap is you have this idea when you start of where you want your work to be and what you want it to look like. So, like, you have this, if you're a CEO, you have this business, this is what the business is, and you have a great culture and all great people, or you're starting a new project or a book or a podcast, whatever. And you see, you know what good taste is, you know what it is, but you don't yet have the skill set to get there. And so you have to show up and do the work and suck at it. And only by doing the work can you shorten the gap. And now your taste kind of matches your skill set catches up to your taste. And I just love that story because I think we can all relate to that, right? Like we have to show up and do the work. And man, it can be hard. And you know what? It's messy. As you said, I have a podcast called Create for No Reason. And I think almost every guest, when talking about the creative process, talks about how messy it is. It's messy. You try something, it doesn't work. It does. You want to change it. All of the things in between. We have to get over the messiness of it all. But the more comfortable we get being uncomfortable and sitting in that mess and knowing that we're going to get through, and when we come out the other side a different person, like that's what's worth it.
It's amazing to me because as a parent, and I'm sure there's a lot of parents listening, but I remember what it was like the first time my son played sports, like YMCA basketball and junior football and things like that. And he had this expectation of, oh, I'm going to score baskets and I'm going to score touchdowns. And it didn't just happen automatically. I'm like, son, just because you put on a uniform and you show up doesn't mean you're going to get some magical skills and abilities that from nowhere when you haven't ever done any of this. Like, you got to do your best and make your best better. And if there are kids that are faster than you and stronger than you, can jump higher than you, have more experience than you, then you have the choice. You can find something that comes easier for you that you like more. You can invest your time in that. But the bottom line is you're going to have to put in the time and energy and effort to suck less and improve.
Yep.
And it's funny because as parents, we can give that advice and it's like, well, duh. But when you become a professional and you get out responsibility, it's like, well, I can't go out and do something bad. No, that's why you practice ahead of time and you do the work ahead of time and you prepare so that you don't just go wing things. Wouldn't encourage your son or daughter to just go wing it when they're playing a sport. Well, you don't just go wing something either, but you do try and you do prepare and you do the best that you can. You notice what worked, what didn't work, adjust, adapt, and improve. But you don't not do it and you don't have expectations of excellence when you haven't put in the basic work. And it's almost comical to me that as professionals and adults, we can't look at ourselves, or that some people don't look at ourselves with the same and give our same self the same advice we would give to our kids.
All right. It's so, well, Mason, that's the easiest. It's so easy for us to give other people advice. We can fix everyone else's problems. We're great at that.
So some of your content argues that happiness isn't rooted in external markers like money or status. How do you define happiness for yourself, and what practices would you recommend to executives to foster happiness within higher pressure workplaces that a lot of them operate in?
I think, happiness is such an interesting topic because a lot of people are in pursuit of happiness. I want to be happy. And what's interesting is I don't necessarily, in fact, Matthew Kelly has a book called Resisting Happiness. There's a lot of books around happiness. I don't think that much about happiness. I think more about making progress and doing meaningful work. Like to me, it's about creating and doing meaningful work. And when I focus on that, I'm happier. So I feel like it's like the byproduct of what I'm working towards. So instead of trying to get happy, I focus on the things that I can do, right? I focus on contributing, doing meaningful work, building this business, working on my creative projects, like doing things that I feel like are fulfilling to me and supporting others. And when I do that, that is where happiness comes. And so I think it's important for us to discover, what does that look like, right? Like what are the things that would, after you do them, you find yourself feeling happier, you find yourself feeling more joyful. And so And I mean, you asked about leaders specifically, but I think just people in general, right? Like we just have to become a little bit more self-aware of like what drives us and noticing our emotions a little bit more. Like what are the things that we're doing that leads to happiness or joy or provides us with more energy or drains our energy. Just like when we recognize those pieces of our lives, then we know what areas might need a little bit more help than others. And we also know what we should be spending some more of our time doing and what things we should stop doing.
Amen, and especially on the stop doing part. Like, I'm very clear on mine. I have very cool friends and I love all of them, but I wanna do what I do best and like to do most, and I want to do cool things in cool places with cool people when I want, where I want, for as long as I want. So if someone comes up to me and says, "Hey, I got this great idea to" I'm great, that sounds great for you, but does it meet this criteria? Am I getting to do what I do best and like to do most with who I want, where I want, when I want, for as long as I want? Well, no, not really. Well, then I'm not willing to stop doing the things that I'm currently doing and enjoying and having fun to go do something like that. Usually, I might take a flyer every once in a while just for sense of adventure, but as a general rule, avoiding things that don't fit into that world gives me peace.
Yeah.
And it's worth it to me to have those filters. I know you also emphasize surrounding yourself with creative friends and spending time outside. How can leaders intentionally weave similar creative habits into company culture to maybe spark innovation or prevent burnout, in your opinion?
I think having creative friends is extremely important. The outside piece is also extremely important. I'm sure that there's lots of people that listen to this show that have heard all the science behind taking walks and being outside and outdoors and grounding exercises and all of those pieces.
You'd be
For
right.
me, I'm like, I'm sure that comes up all the time because we know it. Here's the thing that's so crazy about humans, the human condition. Just like we know what we should be doing. We don't always do it. It's so funny. It's like we've read all the books, we've gotten all the advice, and yet we still ask these same questions and we're still wondering why we're feeling unfulfilled or we're not happy or we haven't gotten as fit as we wanted to. We know what we need to do. But so for me, like I know I take walks every morning. It is my favorite part of the day. I love it. I I don't listen to something. Usually like I might think of something and then voice record it, or maybe I'll take out my notes app and start writing something. But it is my favorite part of the day. And I think it's so important. And one of the ways that I think for business that's fun to incorporate. So I used to work at this co-working space, which was so fun because I had my own business at the time and it's lonely, right? When you're alone and working by yourself. And so at a co-working space, there's so much energy. You get so much energy around being around other people, even if those people are working on something completely different. I don't even know what their business is, but it doesn't matter. Just like the collective energy of working to like side by side, there's something really magical about that. And so if somebody wanted to have a meeting with me, everyone's like, oh, let's do lunch, let's grab drinks or coffee or whatever. No, I would always say, no, you can come downtown. And I worked downtown, which was so amazing. And I would say, hey, why don't you come downtown and meet me in our co-working space and we'll go for a walk and talk. So all of my meetings when I worked at the co-working space were walk and talks. They would come, meet me at the office, and then we would just like walk around. It was Delray Beach, Florida, and we would just walk around Delray Beach, and that's how I had meetings. It was so fun, and almost everybody when they left, they would say, "That was really cool. Like I want to start doing that for my meetings." I'm like, "I know, isn't this so much better than like having a lunch or something?" And it just like helped spark more creative ideas and you're like moving, right? There's something about movement and talking to somebody about a project that is just really cool. So I think that's a fun way. Even now in our office now, like we laugh because we're in this big building and I always look out my window. I'm like, oh, someone's walking around the building. Everyone in our office, we all like pop out and we'll just walk around the building just to get outside, get some sun and just get some steps in.
You that's a I learned I one of the reasons I love podcasting is I love talking to smart people, and sometimes I get new ideas, sometimes I get important reminders, and I'm getting both out of this one. That was an important reminder to me. Like I do a lot of cycling, and I can't tell you years past how much time I've enjoyed going out for people are like, "Oh, how can you go out for a 5-hour bike ride?" And I'm like, "How can you sit at a bar stool for 5 hours?"
Right?
But I have friends that are fit enough to go do that, and we do, and I can't tell you how much like, you're right, the flow and the energy and the creativity and the banter back and forth, and all of a sudden, 5 hours on the bike goes by like that, whereas if you were sitting at a across the desk, 5 hours might seem like an eternity. But then you get all excited and you get flow and you have ideas and creativity flowing and it works. You're right. And whether you're walking or cycling or running, I can totally see all of that. And that's a reminder to me to get back on my bike and spend some time with some of my friends, as opposed to let's just meet at a restaurant or let's meet at the office or whatnot. That's a great reminder. Thank you. Let me think. I know. Let's talk a little bit about your podcasting. I know that you host the Create for No Reason podcast, and you produce weekly inspirational emails, and you juggle multiple creative projects. How have these side ventures honed your leadership skills, and what lessons could executives glean from pursuing creative endeavors outside of their day job?
Well, I love my projects. I think our creative projects, they just fuel us in so many ways. And I also recognize that any type of project that we do, whether you're starting a podcast, a newsletter, or any type of this, for some people that it's work, right? For some people, like, no, that's what I do for my business. That's not a creative project. For me, it happens to be more of a creative project. You have to think through and be strategic about some of that stuff. So the way that I think about podcasting, I can and the things that I've learned about podcasting, the things that I've learned about producing content weekly, whether it's writing or podcasting or interviewing or asking questions, like all those skills that are necessary in order to pursue these kinds of creative acts can bring that into my work, right? Like, it's helped me draft really great marketing copy for our business. It's helped me with interviewing. I have a podcast for the business. So before I started the Lead with Culture podcast, I had done however many episodes of Create for No Reason. So I've been the art of interviewing. And so doing that and getting better at interviewing. And also that helps with even just people, right? Just like you said, you love podcasting because it's introducing you to really cool people. Same thing for us. I feel
Oh,
like it's introduced me to some really cool people and some new ideas that, had I not been curious and asked them to be on the show, I wouldn't have learned and taken into the business. And so I've learned so much from these creative activities. And so that's why I think it's important for any leader to have a creative passion. I mean, I think for some people, look, there's an executive that was just in my office the other day and she started crocheting. I'm like, that's cool. And she's recognizing, like, it's really cool because she has a hard time kind of calming her brain and relaxing. And so she started crocheting, and then she realized I could actually crochet quotes from, just different like quotes around the business that I can then maybe like give to our clients or do. So you never know what's going to show up when you get curious and you feed into that curiosity and you just start a passion project. I had a friend who she had read my book, and she said, "Man," and she's very successful entrepreneur, and she said, after I read your book, I was so inspired. I took out she didn't have a piano keyboard. She said my keyboard was in my closet, all dusted, like all dusty. I haven't taken it out in years. And she said, I was so inspired to like start playing again. And because she started playing her piano again, guess what? She had these ideas of, oh my gosh, I think I'm going to write this new book, this other book. She had written a couple books. And so she started just the act of getting back into music inspired her to want to write again. And so I thought, oh, that's the coolest thing. You just never know what's going to show up when you pursue your creativity. I love it. There's just, story after story after story, right? It's like we have to be in action in order for things to start happening in our life.
And I'm going to agree with everything you just said and add a little bit of fuel to your fire, because the whole thing of podcasting for me, it has been a blessing beyond anything I'd hoped for. And what I mean by that is I remember sitting in college. I went through 4 years of college and I sat and I listened to excellent professors talk about what authors had written about in their marketing books or their management books or their whatever. And we studied them and had tests on them. And now the world is moving so fast that by the time a professor would teach out of a book, by the time you get out of the semester, or certainly by the time you graduate, some of that stuff might be obsolete or outdated. And as a student, I sat there listening and learning to a professor's opinion about what was important about, or what they think the author meant. Because I was willing to suck at something new and do a podcast and work on making my best better, I get to talk to people who are brilliant, going straight to the source, someone who wrote a book that came out last week or last month. So it isn't outdated. It is directly relevant to what's going on right now. And I'm finding that it fascinates me and interests me to be able to keep up with all the new stuff and the people that I've gotten to meet. I'm going to give a shout. I grew up in the 80s and I totally liked hard rock hair bands and whatnot. But anyhow, I got to interview a few months ago one of my guitarists for one of my favorite bands. And
Oh,
we're
that's so
getting
cool.
shout out to Ryan Patrick with the band Otherwise. He was a great sport. But we talked about business, we talked about marketing, and a lot of the principles and things that he uses in the marketing of his business. His label, what started out with being a Sony. They were signed by Sony and put out 6 albums. Now they're an independent artist. So now they're responsible for their own band's management, booking, promotions, etc. So now not only is he an artist, but he also has to be a business person. And the experiences and lessons in that industry are transferable into other ones. And if you're not willing to go out, be creative and go outside of your comfort zone and listen to people in other industries and other markets and other niches, it's fascinating to me to see how one industry has figured out something that another industry hasn't. And a lot of lessons are transferable. And it's just, I have been bestowed with blessings about, like, I would pay money to I say this in hindsight now, knowing what I know now, I would pay money to get the opportunities to talk to the wonderful people that I get to talk to, because I learn so much interesting and relevant information that makes me a better human, that makes me a better business person, and makes me more capable of serving my business community in ways that I would have never done if I hadn't been willing to explore the creative side and get outside of my comfort zone and turn strangers into friends. And when you start talking about the rewards of creativity and getting outside your comfort zone, you're 100% correct. And it's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on there, because I thought you would do a better job of explaining it than me. And you have. I noticed, let's talk a little bit about social media. I know that you've noted that social media scrolling can lead to comparison, perfectionism, and overthinking. How do you set boundaries with digital platforms? And what advice do you have for leaders seeking to encourage healthy technology habits across their teams?
It's an interesting conversation. I mean, I know there's been obviously a lot of articles. There was a documentary I know around social media and just the how addicted we are to it, and how all of these platforms, they're designed to get us addicted to them, right? And
Oh,
so
sure.
it's and what's crazy, going back to, we know what we should be doing. We literally watch those kinds of documentaries and we know what it's doing, and yet we still let it take this hold on us. And so I think it is hard for a lot of people to put their phones away when you walk around downtown. I mean, how many 9 out of 10 people are scrolling on their phone, walking down the sidewalk. And so I think we have to be very intentional about how to do that. You know, Cal Newport is really probably one of the experts on this. He has written a number of books. One of them is Deep Work. The other is, I forget, is it Digital Detox? But he talks all about doing a digital detox. And I think the way that he does it was interesting. He basically describes it as the way a good way to do it would be do 30 days of no social media, right? So take the apps off of your phone. And I like what he said, because he basically said it's going to, obviously, just like we suck when we start something new, it's going to suck. You're going to grab for your phone, you're going to reach for it, because that's what you're used to doing. That's your habit. That's just what if that's the habit that you have in your life, it's going to be a little bit challenging to change that. But he says, do it for 30 days. Just allow yourself, get off social media, don't look at it. And then after 30 days, assess and see how you feel. And for some people, they recognized, wow, I really don't like this particular one, right? Like, I'm not calling whatever it is. Like, maybe
Right.
they're like, I don't need Facebook, or I really didn't miss Instagram, or whatever it is. But maybe
Right.
they're like, I really didn't care to go back on these sites, but I really missed YouTube because I learned a lot, or I really loved my podcast there, or whatever it is. And so he said, kind of do an assessment, see how you feel. And he said, for a lot of people, that's what the outcome was. They recognize, hey, I don't need to be on these apps, but you know what? I actually really do like YouTube. So I'm going to go back on it, or TikTok, or whatever it is. And so, but then they're able to then give themselves boundaries around, hey, I'm only going to do it maybe 2 times a day, or at night, or whatever that looks like. So I think it's something very personal, and you have to do what's right for you. I know some people say, well, I have to be on it for business. And I would disagree with that, because Sure, if you have to be on it to post, that's one thing, but you don't have to be on it all day. You don't have to be
Right.
scrolling all day. And so I think it's just really important for us to be very self-aware. How does it make you feel? Right? Like that's the biggest thing is that I find that people, if it's making you feel overwhelmed, if it's making you feel like I'm behind in life, if it's making you feel like, oh, everyone else is living their best life and I'm over here not, that is not true. So you're feeding into this narrative that is untrue because you're just like scrolling. And so I think it's just important for us to recognize, how are you feeling? Is it something that brings you energy, brings you joy, enhances your life? If the answer is no, I think we should question continuing to do that and then figuring out how you're going to kind of step away from it. And, I don't know if there's like the perfect plan, but if anyone is really in that space where they do want to do that kind of a detox, I would definitely recommend going to Cal Newport's work because he really does a beautiful job. And one of the coolest things about him is that he literally writes about technology and all these platforms, and he does not even use social media. So he is
Right.
someone who talks about it and doesn't use it. So I find that to be very fascinating. And I also find it interesting that some of the leaders of these big organizations, these big tech companies, their children don't even have social media. The stuff that they're promoting, their kids don't even have it because they know what is doing. And it's a self-awareness thing.
It's your answer is interesting to me. I was kind of halfway waiting to see if you were going to double down on what we talked about earlier about the comparisons of perfectionism and overthinking. Because my gut tells me that there's a lot of creativity that doesn't happen where people are perfectly capable of coming up with ideas or things, but they have this vision because they've seen this world on social media where everything looks perfect. Like, oh, I couldn't do this or I couldn't do that. And they automatically assume that this is the standard of excellence. And you talked about what would you call it, the taste gap?
Yeah.
Like, oh, this is what the standard is, and I couldn't do this or I couldn't do it, so why would I bother? And I'm very conscientious to not allow those types of thoughts in my head at all. I see something, I'm willing to try something new and do my best. And I guess what Tony Robbins would call it an internal frame of reference. Some people ask, how do you know if you're good at something? Well, if someone tells you you are, external frame of reference, or if you know that what you did is solid and you feel comfortable representing that as your work, then you have an internal frame of reference and it doesn't matter what other people say. I operate from
Hmm.
an internal frame of reference, so social
Well,
media
that
doesn't faze me that much.
Yeah, I think that's really important, Mason. I think if everybody came from that place, then they would be creating what they felt that they were meant to create. And I also think in talking about social media, I think it's important for us I always recommend people create before you consume.
That's a great idea.
Create before you consume, before you get on social media, before you start watching other people's content and videos and everything. What do you want to write about? What posts do you want to share? What video do you want to record? What podcast do you want to do? Who do you want to interview? Because that puts us in that internal, like you're talking about. It's like, oh, this is important to me and I want to share it. But the second that we start watching someone else's, then we might think, well, they already did that, or they did it better than me. And so I think creating before you consume is huge. That's why in the morning, writing, walking without listening to a podcast or an audiobook or TikTok or whatever it is that you do. I think those things, they allow more space for creativity. When we're filling our mind with other people's content, we are no longer allowing space for our own ideas. And we're prohibiting ourselves from coming up with the ideas that are meant for us. They're inside of us for a reason, and so we have to give them room to breathe. Yeah, that crave. I was gonna share something else, and now I just forgot. But anyway,
It's
I think that's an important piece.
one of the things that just on the topic of creativity that I feel compelled to share is that I've written a bunch of books and things like that, but there's been times where even on social media posts where I thought, wow, this is so valuable. This is gonna be so impactful, and crickets. No one responds at all. It's like, I'm like, that was deep. That was powerful. Like, I wish someone had told me that before I went through years to figure this out. Like, if I would have known this or had this perspective years ago, it would have helped me. And there's been times where I think almost an afterthought, like a flippant, like this is not that big of a deal, but I'm going to share it anyway, see what happens. And people are like, wow, that's the most insightful thing ever. That's so helpful. Like I am kind of getting to the point now where I create and I share, and what's supposed to resonate with some people is supposed to resonate with them. What's not, it's not. And I let them judge. But as long as I feel that I have my conscience is in alignment with providing value, that's going to help people in some way, I'm not going to judge that. I'm going to put it out there and let the place of ideas decide which ones of mine are worthy of having an impact and not. Sometimes it's not even
Yeah.
sometimes it's not even the amount of impact, like, oh, you got this many likes. To me, it's not that. But if it could help one person a lot and change their life, that's would be more valuable to me, knowing that I was able to really change the life for one person than give 100,000 people a little, oh yeah, that was kind of neat or that was kind of cool. It's
Yeah.
not just the volume, it's the depth of the impact. And
And even not change their life, change their day. Like, make them
yep,
smile. Like, just, like, the simple like, sometimes we're so big in our ideas, like, "Oh, it has to change their life." How about it just change their day, their morning? You, like, helped spark an idea. You helped them in a really difficult morning where they didn't wanna get up and do something, and now they read your post and they did. I think that's really cool. Like, I started sharing my poetry on LinkedIn, and I was like, "Poetry on LinkedIn? I don't know why I'm doing that." And I just like it. I just wanna share it. Like, if no one likes it, great. I I ask a lot of my guests about how they define success with their creative projects, and you know what shows up all the time, and it's my favorite answer? It's, I define success by if I'm proud of it. Am I proud of the work? If I'm proud of the work, it's a success. And if no likes, no one comments, no one nothing, I just know that I loved it. And I think that any type of creative work that we do, whether you write a book, a podcast, a business, right? You're literally saying, "Hey, I had this idea. I wrote this. I did this. I created this. Here, I put it out in the world. I hope you like it. And if you don't, that's okay too."
sure. I love your message and I really appreciate your time on this. If people wanted to learn more about you, your podcast, your books, your consulting, what's the best way for them to connect with you and learn more?
Well, of course, social media. Don't go on social media. No, the easiest way is just to find me. KateVolman.com is my website. And then if you are a leader and you're interested at all in learning about the Dream Manager and how you can really help your team members grow and develop, become the best version of themselves so that your company can become the best version of itself, I would love to connect with you. That's thedreammanager.com. But it's an incredible program. And I'm so blessed to be able to work with the team here at Floyd Consulting and Matthew Kelly, who is a prolific author and written over 40 books. And so we've got an incredible team of people here that really support leaders and company culture.
So if people wanted to buy your books, do they get those at your website or Amazon?
Oh yeah, you can go. My website takes you to all the places, but yeah, my book's on Amazon. You can get it right there, and I hope you like it. And if you do, write a review and all that fun stuff, because that's always I always love hearing the stories of what people got out of it.
Which social sites are you most active on? Like LinkedIn or any of
Um,
the others?
LinkedIn, I would say LinkedIn and YouTube are the two. LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube are the three that I probably spend the most time.
Cool. Well, it has been a pleasure having you. I've enjoyed every moment. I thank you so much for being here and hopefully we'll catch up soon and do this again sometime.
Thanks so much for having me, Mason. I appreciate it.
It was a pleasure.